lucky to have with us today our winemaker in Italy at Tenuta di Arceno. I mean, really quickly, before we dive in, Lawrence, to your story and talk about the wines and the estate, you know, Jackson Family Wines is long known in the United States for brands like La Crema and then the iconic Vintners Reserve under the Kendall Jackson brand. But not many people know that Jess Jackson, being the visionary that he was, and his family expanded the reach, you know, outside of California into Oregon, and then later into France, Australia, Chile, and South Africa, and including Italy. So it's become a global company, and we're really proud of the wines that you've been making and the team. So it's fun to talk to you a little bit here on a Sunday evening in Tuscany. So can you tell us, before we go into the estate, and I've got some slides to show everybody just to show the beauty and the diversity of the estate, but you've already been drinking at 7 o'clock your time. I just popped these open about an hour ago.
Dinner's cooking upstairs, so.
Very good. Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you end up being a New York native, end up in Italy? I mean, it seems like a dream job to a lot of us.
Yeah, not to take up all the time, but I'll summarize it as quick as I can. I was born in New York City, Staten Island, so it's sort of New York City. And, Italian roots. I grew up, my grandmother's still living in Sicily. I went to university in California and started working in a winery in California in 1995 at Ed Mead's in Anderson Valley. As the short version of the story goes, it was a Wednesday. I was working at Ed Mead's and I got a phone call from the office, and they said, "Do you want to go to Tuscany for 2 months?" I said, "Sure." Who wouldn't say no? I said, "Sure, why not?" That was Wednesday. On Friday, they gave me a call and said, "We have your ticket." And the ticket was for Sunday, and that was June 2002, and I never went back.
That's
so
amazing.
24 hours notice for 2 months only, 20 years ago.
That's great. And you're living the dream. You're in the farmhouse there. You have a family there in Italy, a son, and that's great. That's really, really great.
I'm in the breakfast room of our bed and breakfast. We have a little bed and breakfast. And actually, our first guests of 2021 are arriving quite soon. So
that's
first
great.
Guest we have, so,
Good to hear. Good to hear. That's great. Well, you were given a call from the home office to go to Italy. You were working under the famous vigneron Pierre Sayon, who's still involved, obviously, with Arceno. He's known here in California for Verite and Chateau La Segue in Bordeaux. And he brought over, I think, a very, very unique concept to Tuscany, long adopted in places like Burgundy and even up in Piemonte and Barolo, this micro-cru vinification. And I think that's something special. As we roll through the slides, and we can talk a little bit about the estate. That's something that you can really, I think, speak to how this estate where we're located. We prepared some slides here just to kind of show everyone on the call. A lot of people, this might be their first time being acquainted with Arceno. So just to show everybody where we're located quickly, we are located in Chianti Classico in the district, but on the southern end in Castelnuovo, Berardenga. And we'll slide through here. I've got our associate producer, Lena, in the back with the handles here. So we're located there in the southern area there where you see Castelnuovo, Berardenga, which, you can, as we get into the pictures here, Lawrence, you can talk a little bit what makes that zone here. It looks like a butterfly to me. And we've got some great neighbors. We're there on that eastern edge there. We have Felsina to the south, San Felice, Castello di Bossi. So really, really long time, iconic brands right in the neighborhood. I've always been told in my times visiting there that this part of Tuscany tends to have a little bit more of a robust profile of wines compared to Chiantis that come from the north.
So yes, they say, and it's a generalization, of course, that the southernmost part of the Chianti Classico region has a little bit warmer weather, so the wine get a little bit more fruity, a little more fleshy, and a little bit bigger wines. But it's really micro-cru orientation, because we have some wines that get big and fleshy, and we have some wines at 600 meters that are steely and acid. So, you get a little combination of both. But in general, it's a little bit warmer here, and so the wines are a little bit bigger and fruitier.
Yeah, that's great. And you can see here on the screen, there's 6 wines that you produce, at the estate. They're all red wines. There are 3 on the left there that are Chianti Classico, Chianti Classico Reserva, Gran Selezione. They're Sangiovese, they're beautiful wines. And then the other half of the collection, it's again 100% estate grown and produced and bottled, is the IGT collection, and specifically Valladorna and Arcana, which we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. Those are really, I think, some of the icons of the estate, and fast becoming one of the better known IGT wines in Tuscany. But we'll cycle through. I think it's really important to show everybody a little bit of the imagery. The estate being 1,000 hectares, 2,500 acres, that sounds huge. But only 10% really is planted. The rest, we have olive trees there. We've got, other forestry, other things that help the biodiversity. But let's go back. Let's show the team there. If Lena, you can go back one more slide. This is you on the right there, working with Pierre in the middle, and then Michele. Tell us a little bit about the team. And we have another slide with Sandra, who's the general manager. I mean, I think what we see in quality over the years has been a testament to the team, the longevity of the team working together. What would you address that to?
I mean, something like unique at Arceno in a way is that the turnover of people is insignificant. I mean, Michele's been there, the vineyard manager. He's been there before me. He's been there since 1995, so 25 years. Sandra, when Jess and Barbara bought the estate, she was working at the old estate, so they brought her with her. The people in the vineyards, our pruning crew, they've been there 15, 20 years. My 2 guys in the cellar have been there since 2006. So everything's longevity and continuity, and that's good for a winery. When everybody's there for a long time, you learn more. You learn by your mistakes, and you learn by being there. And a winery becomes from a good winery to a great winery with this longevity and with the knowledge that you get from the time. So everybody's been there quite a long time. I'm almost an old timer now. I'm pushing 20 years. It doesn't feel like it, but 20 years.
It's great.
So yeah.
And the estate, when Jess and Barbara purchased it in the 90s, obviously winemaking, viticulture had been there for thousands of years. Bringing Pierre on, he kind of mapped out, these different 60 plus micro-crus, which again, like we mentioned, revolutionary at the time. Nobody in Tuscany was doing it in the 1990s. But let's take a look. What I find interesting about the property is it's almost like you're a chef being a winemaker, and you have so many different ingredients, pieces, and you have 1,000-foot elevation vineyards like you see on the screen there. And then you got vineyards that are a little bit lower. So, they ripen at different times. You got different clones. I mean, we can go on and on and on and bore the audience about rootstocks and clones, but it's almost like you've got like a dream palette there to make some wonderful wines.
Well, I mean, we have, 5 different varietals for sure, and a little bit more, at elevations from 350 meters all the way up to 600 meters. So we get different styles. And what we try to do with the micro-crus is ferment as many things separate as possible to have all these different selections and choices later. So we have, after a harvest, say, 120 different lots from 10 barrels to 15 barrels, all little blocks of a vineyard fermented separate. And those 120 wines end up in 6 wines somehow. Very slowly we blend to make those 6 wines. So there's lots of choices and components and ingredients, a little sale, a little pepper, little things you can do to make the blend. So it's all about blending. You don't blend right away. When Pierre comes, usually comes in November, after harvest after, and that's when we make the final blends, when the lots mature and they're really showing what they are. So you wait as long as you can to make the final blends, and you really, in the last month of the blending, that's when you really add the 5%, 10%, or things like this to really make the signature of every year and every blend.
Yeah, no, that's great. They've been getting better every year. I mean, I think the hallmark of a lot of these wines, especially the IGT wines that we'll talk about shortly here, are really ageable, and they have, I think you and Pierre, really getting to know the land and the soil and all the different crus really, really, it shows in the wines. The IGT wines, well, before we dive into that, the wines have been accelerating in quality. I remember in the 90s when I was a buyer, they've really accelerated quite ahead. You've received plenty of scores from top press, including the two wines that are in this total wine offer. But I think really proud for the estates, 3 years in a row, Gambaro Rosso award, which for those of us on the call in America, we might not recognize it. The Gambaro Rosso is a very prominent magazine, and they release a 1, 2, 3 glass award. And the 3 glass, the Tre Bicchieri, is a huge honor. And the estate received that 3 years in a row. Chianti Classico, I think one of the Valladornas, and then most recently Chianti Classico Reserva. So again, that's a huge honor.
I mean, everybody, you love the points, points and scores and things like that, because I don't want to say it's job security, but it's a little job security.
Sure.
And then you can't base your things on the points and the scores, because different journals have different palettes, and you might get a 94 in one and a 97 in another, and you're like, why did he give it? So everybody has their different palettes and their different approaches to their scoring and things like that. But I really like the Tre Bicchieri. The Tre Bicchieri is because it's local in a way.
Sure, yeah, it's coming from the Italian market per se, and it's becoming a bigger thing globally with their tours and things. So that's great. Let's focus really on the IGT. So we've got the two really kind of cornerstone expressions. I think we have Arcanum, which is the Cabernet Franc dominant, and you have Valladorna, which is Merlot dominant. And years back, I remember traveling as a kid to Italy, and then later getting into wine and working in wine. The term Super Tuscan, and there was all these freaks of nature that were bottlings that were popping up, and it kind of was a fad, like in the 80s and 90s. And then now it's really accelerated into its own real category, and some of the most famous wines coming out of Tuscany are IGT. I mean, we know Massetto, Macchioli, Sassicaia, those are sort of those benchmarks. And, we like to think that Valladorna and Arcanum are really kind of in that mix. We have, definitely attention that we're getting on those. Let's talk a little bit about those two wines, and, the Merlot and Cab Franc. Obviously, Sangiovese is synonymous for centuries with Tuscany, but Cabernet Franc is everywhere now. Everybody's playing it, and most of it is grown out there on the coast in Bulgaria, where it's a little warmer. But you've got this diversity of this estate with elevation and soils that really, I think, create some incredible wines. And I have been staring at these glasses here, and I'm going to just, it's only 10:20 out here in California, but I'm going to go ahead and taste them. I know everybody on the call, you may not have the bottles yet. You order them, or you're going to order them. So we can kind of, at least Lawrence can, from his vision, tell you a little bit about each wine and the vintage, 2015.
Okay, we'll start with Valladorna, because I always usually drink the Valladorna first. I don't know why. Not necessary, but I usually do. So Valladorna is based on Merlot every year. And the vineyard of Valladorna is our lowest vineyard, 350 meters on clay. So the clay, like makes the ripening season really long. So it's the last Merlot that gets ripe and the last Merlot that gets picked. So you get these long, chewy tannins. And this wine for me is really a classic example of not the perfect, surfers are in search of the perfect wave. Winemakers are in search of the perfect tannins. So these tannins are like velvet covered tannins in a way, like they're chewable tannins. They enter your mouth. They don't really dry your mouth. They roll along your tongue and keep the experience of the wine going. So Valladorna, I really love the tannins every year in this vineyard area in this wine. So, but it's a really great fruit expression. Classic Merlot, herbal tones here and there, but a quality wine every year. And usually we're picking this vineyard when we're already started picking Sangiovese. So this comes in really, really late, which really does its benefit for the structure.
What I really love about this wine, and it kind of, this translates over also into the Arcanum, is even though it is Merlot, and Merlot is an international varietal, we've got Merlot in California and all over the world, France, obviously. But it tastes Italian. It has that herbal note that you mentioned, and that acidity, which we get in Italian wines. And I think that's what makes this wine super special. Is it might kind of have a DNA of a French varietal, but it definitely has a flair of an Italian. So I think that's.
Yeah. I mean, the soils here promote wines with a high minerality, a high acidity relative to other Merlots. So if you compare our wines with the coastal wines, our wines would be much more higher vibrational energy, a little more tight, more high strung. And I love that in the wine. The calcium soils give a little minerality. So they are much more brighter than you would expect for a Merlot or a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Cabernet Franc. They're much more brighter and much more intense.
Yeah, no, I could sense that. I definitely can sense that. And, I think too, you work through it, but in 2015, where you have a warmer vintage, that's, and as climate is changing throughout the world and in Tuscany, I think in my palate, I taste that the wines coming from the inland properties like Arceno really are able to kind of weather that and have that diurnal chef between night and day, where they could really, the quality still, can move forward in a great way.
I mean, especially where this vineyard is here. When I ride to work every day on my motorcycle, it'll be 3 degrees Celsius, 2 or 3 degrees lower in this vineyard than when I enter the estate in 1 kilometer. So it's a really cool area. So the nighttime and daytime temperatures really, really change a lot here. So that's, it's always positive for grape ripening.
That's great. And then we can move over to the Cab Franc, the Arcana, which, I have a bottle here too. It's really the flagship of the estate, I think, in many people's eyes. And, we noticed too, you've got on the bottle, there's the statue of the fawn, and we don't want to go too much. And we had it on the slideshow. And that's really, I think, one of the nice symbols of the estate is this fawn statue that we talk about, half man, half beast. And it's really representing sort of, the old and the new ways of doing things. And it's right here on the bottle, which is kind of cool, playing with the camera, but yeah. Hence the name of the wine.
And, I don't know if Arcanum they say, is the Etruscan name for Arceno.
Yes.
So that's where the name comes from. So it's all connected. It's all related.
Yeah. I mean, you've got all that history there where thousands of years you had, again, winemaking pre-Roman area. So that's very, very cool.
So, I could talk about Cab Franc forever. So tell me when you want me to start.
Yeah, let's talk. I mean, Cab Franc is super. Merlot, the Merlot is beautiful, but in Tuscany, I think Cabernet Franc, and there's plenty of examples. Cabernet Franc, last I read, I think next to Sangiovese is the second most planted varietal in the province there. So tell us a little bit about what makes this wine special. I mean, I love it. It's super ageable. Some of the 8s and 9s right now are just singing. 15 is just released. So let's talk about this.
Well, when I first got here with Pierre in 2002, we had 1.5 hectares of Cabernet Franc. That's it. Now we have 17. So we saw right away that the Cabernet Franc gets ripe perfectly here. It doesn't get ripe too early. It doesn't get ripe too late. So in the hot years and the cool years, it's always consistent, always high quality. It reflects the vintage, a little more fruit in the hotter years like this year, a little more of that mint, sweet mint, oregano, the herbal signature of Cabernet Franc in the cooler years. But every year, it comes in a perfect window. It doesn't want to get botrytis. It doesn't want to raisin in the hot years. So it's like it grows so well here. And in 2002, I don't know anybody had Cabernet Franc anywhere in Chianti Classico. Maybe they did, but I didn't know anybody. And now at 17, we're probably going to be the granddaddies of the Cabernet Franc experiment in Chianti Classico.
Yeah.
You know, on the coast in Bulgari, of course, they had a lot of Cabernet Franc. Macchioli, some famous wineries there, Cabernet Franc. But I think in this area, we were the innovators in the Cabernet Franc. And now it's taken off Cabernet Franc. It's become, you know, a little popular.
Yeah. Yeah. You see more of it. More of it.
So we were, you know, when Bear was here, we were like, we're planting a lot of Cabernet Franc. You know, at that time, it wasn't so popular. It wasn't, you know, it was a little bit of a risk that we'd end up with 17 hectares of Cabernet Franc and it wouldn't be popular. But it's going in a really good direction because people are understanding that Cabernet Franc has elegance and power. And that's something that really you're looking for in a wine. That's the holy grails, elegance, power, and those nice tannins. So Cabernet Franc can, if you do it right, can give you all those things.
Sure.
It's about how much fruit you leave on the vine, the canopy. If you leave too much fruit on the vine, you might get a little too herbal. Not enough, you might get a little too fruity. You really have to respect the vine and what that vine can do. And, you know, really rewarding great Cabernet Franc. And but once again, when Pierre comes here, I'll have a table full of Sangiovese, a table full of Merlot, a table full of Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and every single Cabernet Franc will be Serie A. That's a football quote. It'll be level A. Okay, it'll be all high quality. Where Sangiovese, say in a cooler year, we'll have some that are at the end, what they get as ripe as they could, and the hotter, things like that. But the Cabernet Franc every year is pretty consistent and quite, it's reliable.
Yeah.
And really a wonderful grape to work with. And now that we have the 17 hectares, I don't know, can I say in 2016, the next year, what we're doing?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, you can give people a little preview.
Okay, in 2016 is the first year we're going to 100% Cabernet Franc. And the whole idea, this is a blend. This has 74, 75% Cabernet Franc with 10 Cabernet Sauvignon, 10 Merlot, a little Petit Verdot. So in 2016, we're going to 100% Cabernet Franc. And the idea is we're making a blend on our different Cabernet Francs. So now with the 17 hectares, we have Cabernet Francs in 10 different locations now and 10 different type of soils. And some of these we regrafted onto old roots. So they're new grapes, but old roots. Yeah. So they're really intense and really complex. And now we make the blend from the different components of Cabernet Franc.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great point with the old vines. So I know there's a calcio game, speaking of Serie A, and starting in about 15 minutes, so we won't keep you long. These wines, incredibly ageable. What are your, Oscar on the chat here had a question about the drinking window. And really quickly, I mean, these wines, to me, I have the luxury of buying a few bottles and drinking them over the next couple of months and then throwing the others in the back of my cellar. They're wines that aren't normally really available. Most of this gets absorbed by our restaurant customers, but with the change in pandemic, we're able to kind of release some to partners like Total Wine. So there's definitely the chance to buy them. What would you tell, just really quickly, the collectors out there on the window of drinking and storage?
I mean, 2002 was the first Arcanum we made, and that's still going well. And it's 2002, so that's 20 years in a most difficult vintage in history in Italy, a vintage that should not age. So in general, 15, 20 years should be without a problem. Then after that 15, 20 years, then you're depending on the vintage. In general, cooler vintages are shy at first, but age longer. Warmer vintage show sooner and age a little bit less. So it depends on the vintage. After 15 years, then you got to watch the vintage and your storage. It's all about storage, where you store the wine.
Right. Very
Even
important.
next to the refrigerator in the kitchen cabinet, it's not going to go.
No.
So 15, 20 years, easy. our 2002 with 20 years, I'm still drinking it. So until I can't drink it, I'm still going to say 20 years plus.
Yeah, no, that's great. And before we leave, yeah, you know, food and wine, at least I'm Italian American. In my household, food and wine is important. You know, it's the most important thing. Um, and obviously in your household too. I've seen pictures of your meals and things. What do you pair with these wines? What you know, it's winter time across America. You know, the rich stews and braised meats. That's what calls me to this. I'm making a risotto tonight. I'm probably gonna pop the Valladorna later, but yeah. What do you suggest?
I mean, I love the Valladorna with any kind of meat for sure. The Valladorna, the chewiness of the Valladorna, I really like with the meat. The Arcanum has that a little herbal tone. So I like to do things like porcinis or truffles because the herbalness of the truffle or the earth of the porcini kind of goes well with the Arcanum, which, you know, the signature sweet mint herbal of the Cabernet Franc. So, you know, I like to do the Arcanum with more mushroom, earthy dishes, and the Valladorna with, you know, more meat dishes. But, you know, they adapt to either way. You know,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but,
I think probably decanting open at a young age like this will open them up, give it a little air, and should be good to go. That's great. Well, you know, the folks at Total Wine, the concierge team, have been really great to work with and give us this opportunity to speak to their audience. The offering for these two wines, the 15 vintage Valladorna and Arcanum from Tenuta di Arceno, will be live through tomorrow, Monday the 18th. So if you haven't, most of you have already received the offering, but if you haven't, you can visit concierge.totalwine.com. That's concierge.totalwine.com. You can click on the offers and you can view the offering there. And they've got a great write-up on the estates. There's more information on the wines, breakdowns, the scores. So I definitely encourage you to take advantage out there of picking up some extra bottles if you haven't already done so. Well, thank you, Lawrence. I know it's getting, well, for in Italian terms, you probably haven't even had dinner yet. It's 7:30, so.
We don't even think about it until 8 o'clock is, you know, as early as it gets.
Well, great. Well, we want to thank you for joining us, and we really appreciate your patience with technology there in the farmhouse. And we encourage everyone on the Zoom today to visit tenutadiarceno.com, the website for the brand. We have a very robust, active Instagram, and if you ever feel that feel like you want to go back to Italy in your mind, you can visit that website. But then when we can all travel again, you know, you can go over and visit Lawrence. He's got, like he said, he has his own. He and his wife have a bed and breakfast in the town of San Guzme, which is basically the estate, and they'd love to see you.
Yeah, I hope to see everybody springtime. We're hoping for spring.
Primavera. Yep, we're all hoping the same thing. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I hope to see you over there soon as well. So grazie, Lawrence. Buonasera.
Yeah.
Salute. Ciao.
Okay. Cheers.
We'll see you. We'll see you next time. All
Cheers.
right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your Sunday.